I have to admit that usually I do try to put in some preparation for this, but today I much had no time. So everything I'm going to say, like, this is just driving back from the island. Like, so if it comes out a little jumbled or whatever, it's because I just didn't prepare. Anyway, so with that in mind, let's start. Okay, so this is Parashas Noach. Parashas Noach. These parashas are difficult. Parashas Noach, these are very difficult parashas because it's very foreign. Some of the things, the events that took place in these parashas are somewhat foreign. Once you're ready, Parshas Lech Lecha comes, Avram Avinu, it's already family. It's a little bit closer. Parshas Noach is a little bit difficult. So the pasuk says like this. Ela told us, Noach, right? These are the generations. These are the events of Noach. Noach ish tzaddik kamim. Noach was a complete tzaddik b'darosov in his generation. In his generation, he was a complete tzaddik. So we all know Rashi makes a point. Rashi says, what does it mean that he was a tzaddik in his generation? So Rashi says, Yesh marpasenu darashamay l'shvach. Some people interpret this in a positive way. That what? That if he was she'ilu haya, that if he was in the generation of Avram Avinu, if he had Avram Avinu to back him up, he would have been even greater. And some people make it a negative, that if he would have been with Avram Avinu, he would have been considered nothing. So right off the bat, when we're first introduced to this person called Noach, we know he's a tzaddik. We're told he's a tzaddik. But nevertheless, somehow, when we initially are introduced to this person, Noach, we're automatically comparing him to Avram Avinu. That's automatic. When we talk about Noach, he's a tzaddik, Avram was a tzaddik, and somehow we have to compare the two. Either in a positive way for Noach's sake, or in a negative way for Noach's sake. But there's automatically a comparison between Avram Avinu and Noach tzaddik. Later on in the pasuk, we also have such a thing where we all of a sudden automatically have some comparison between the two tzaddikim. The pasuk says, "Esol Elokim es halach Noach." That Noach walked with Hashem. Noach walked with Hashem. Says Rashi, Noach walked with Hashem. Uba Avram Hoimer. When it comes to Avram Avinu, the pasuk says, "Asher salachti lefanav." That Avram Avinu walked in front of Hashem. What does that mean? So Rashi says, "Noach yitzarech tzad l'tamchay." Noach, in order to walk, in order to be upright, in order to be a tzaddik, he needed Hashem's support. So you had to walk with Hashem, as if, so to speak, Hashem is like helping him along. But Avram Avinu had such inner strength, he was able to walk in front of Hashem. His level of greatness was reached with his own power. By his own power, he didn't need Hashem's support. So again, whenever we're talking about Noach, we're talking about his greatness. He's a complete tzaddik. He's walking with Hashem. All of a sudden, we have to bring up the fact of but Avram Avinu, that was something different. Avram Avinu was greater. He walked in front of Hashem. Avram Avinu was greater in his generation than Noach was in his generation. All of a sudden, we're bringing up this comparison. Why? What's the as if to say Noach and Avram are opposites? So in what way, but they're not. They're both tzaddikim. So in what way? Why is it that whenever we're talking about Noach, we always have to bring up Avram? That's number one. And it's more than that. There's a medrash. Listen to this. I mean, the medrash throughout this whole time period. The Gemara says the following thing. The Gemara says that this world that we know, that we're familiar with, that we're accustomed to, is in existence for 6,000 years. After 6,000 years, the world is going to change drastically from what we're used to. But for this world that we know of, current history, it's 6,000 years. Says the Gemara, that 6,000 year time period is split up into three parts. The first 2,000 years, which is to get to Avram Avinu, says the Gemara, that's Alpayim Toyu. Those are 2,000 years of chaos. 2,000 years of chaos, of nothingness. 2,000 years of chaos. From Avram Avinu, the next 2,000 years, says the Gemara, that's called 2,000 years of Torah. 2,000 years of Torah. And after those 2,000 years, which basically starts, the last 2,000 years basically starts from the time of Mishnayos, those are 2,000 years of Mashiach, where there's a strong potential for Mashiach to come. So we have, even though during this the first 2,000 time period, the first 2,000 years, we have great tzaddikim. You have Adam, you have Musa Shalach, you have Chanoch, you have Noah. Great tzaddikim. Nevertheless, Chazal say that those 2,000 years are called 2,000 years of chaos. And from Avram Avinu, you had Rishaim too. There was Sodom and Amorah. There's Paro. There's all sorts of Rishaim. Nevertheless, that time period is not considered chaotic anymore. That's called a time period of Torah. Listen to the Medrash. The Medrash says the following thing, going back to Parshas Parashas. The Medrash says like this. We all know the Torah starts, right? Parashas bara Elokim es Hashemayim v'aretz, right? In the beginning of creation, v'aretz says sayu v'avaya. The world was shockingly empty. Sayu v'avaya was shockingly empty. Says the Medrash like this. V'aretz says sayu v'avaya. The world was shockingly empty. Zeh Adam Rishon. This is referring to the time period of Adam Rishon. that nothing came of it. No productivity came during the time of Adam Rishon. That's what Chazal said. Ubayu, it was very empty. Zek Kayin. That's the time period of Kayin. The Choshech, and then the pasuk continues, and there was utter darkness. Zedor Shel Enosh. This is the generation of Enosh right before the Mabul, where Avodah Zarah started, where idolatry started to spread. Al Pnei Sahayim, on the face of the depths, says Chazal, Zedor Mabul. That's the generation of the flood. So that this 2,000 years, that's the mamish, empty, dark, nothing. Empty, dark, and nothing. Says the pasuk Omar, Kadosh Baruch Hu, then the Medrash says, but Hashem says, how long is it going to be dark? How much darkness could there be? Tavi ha'ayra. Let light come already. But Yom Elokim Ar, Hashem said, let there be light. Ze Avram. That's Avram Avinu. So again, we see from this Chazal again, despite the fact that in both their generations, they were terrible people. When Noach was alive, terrible. When Avram Avinu was alive, it was also terrible. Nevertheless, somehow, the generation of Noach is called, despite the fact that there was Noach too, it's called darkness, it's called emptiness. And when Avram Avinu comes on the scene, already the whole planet is different. The whole planet is different. It's now called light. Yehi Ar. So what's going on here? Let's understand. You know, the storms say the following thing. The generation of the flood was worthy of destruction. You know, that's clear. They were not living up to where they could have been, and because of that, Hashem needed to destroy them. Hashem could have killed them out in many ways, right? Hashem could have just stopped keeping them alive, and they would just cease to exist. Hashem chose to destroy them in this way of a mabul, of a flood of water. So the storm pointed out the following thing, that if you think about it, there's something very, very familiar with this idea of Hashem sending water to engulf the planet. Reminds you of a mikveh. Reminds you of a mikveh a little bit, right? Now what happens when a person is impure? In order to purify himself, in order to reboot the system, to start over again, what do? You go into a body of water that has mem sa, 40 sa, a certain measurement of water, and that in some way, that's how you sort of become reborn. You start new again. It has a way of purifying, of making things start over again. So say this from Tzaddik says this, and in a certain sense, that's exactly what Hashem was doing with the entire planet. Rebooting the system. How? By purifying the earth. How does Hashem purify the earth? By putting it in a mikveh. That's what the marvel was. It was a big mikveh to purify. But what's interesting is as follows. In order to purify the planet, at this time in history, in times of Noach, what did Hashem need to do? He put the world in a mikveh, but what did that mikveh do in order to purify everything? It completely wiped out all of life. It completely erased and melted all of reality. Everything was dissolved in the waters of the mikveh of the Mabul. There's going to be, in the future time when Mashiach comes, there's also going to be another tahara sa'aretz. There's also going to be another purification of earth. How is that going to happen? So listen to this. This is, there are certain parts of Tanakh that people are familiar with, right? There's certain stories people are familiar with. There's certain other parts of Tanakh where people don't very much know. So there's a sefer called Sefer Yecheskel, Book of Ezekiel. This is one of the parts of Navi that many people don't know about. So not long ago, just a week ago or so, Shabbos Chalamoid of Sukkot, there's a special haftarah that we learned. That haftarah is about the events of Gog and Magog. What's Gog and Magog? We have, again, these are the prophecies of Yecheskel, that after Mashiach comes, and everybody's going to be shown the truth of Torah, the truth of Yiddishkeit, all the negative forces of reality are going to gather together as an army under the command of Gog. Again, how this is going to play out physically, whether it's going to be physically or not, it's not for now. But there's such a thing in our history, you know such a thing as Milchemes Gog and Magog, the war of Gog against the Jewish people. So listen to the pasuk. Pasuk says in Yecheskel like this, Va'ata ben Adam. Hashem says, you human being, Yecheskel. For some reason Yecheskel is always called that, human being. Ata ben Adam, Hinavi al Gog. Go and say the following prophecy about the events of Gog and Magog, about the war against the Jewish people. V'amarta. And say as follows. And he goes on to say the whole story that Gog is going to come and fight against the Jewish people. And he says like this. After, the pasuk says like this. V'shilachti eish b'Magog. Says Hashem, these armies are going to camp up against Mashiach, going to camp up and fight against the Jewish people. V'shilachti eish Magog. I'm going to send a fire against Magog, against this nation. V'yedu ki ani Hashem. And they're going to know through that burning fire that I am Hashem. And my holy name will become clarified in my nation, the Jewish people. My name will not be disgraced anymore. The nations will know that I am Hashem Kadosh B'Yisrael, the Holy One of the Jewish people. Plus, it goes on to say that the entire army of Gog and Magog will be completely annihilated. But listen to this. Listen to this. V'haya b'yamhu, it will be on that day. Etein, this is an unbelievable thing. Etein l'goig makam sham kever b'Yisrael. The pasuk goes out of his way. Hashem says that in those days, after Hashem is going to annihilate the armies of Gog and Magog against Mashiach, they're going to be buried in Israel. Says the pasuk, v'haya b'yamhu, on that day, etein l'goig, I will give to Gog and his armies of rectifying, of fixing. You know, there's a story they say that someone once asked, the Kotzker once asked the Chassid, he said, why are we here on earth? Why does Hashem send us down here? What's our purpose in life? So the Chassid said, in order to fix our neshamas. In order to fix our neshamas, and our neshamas are messed up, we have to fix our neshamas. So the Kotzker said, that's what you learned from me. That's what you learned from me, that you're here only to fix your neshamas. The reason why you're here is to raise heaven. That's what he said. When a person's down here, when he does mitzvahs, he's raising heaven to higher places. What does that mean? It means, listen, there's a way of looking at life in such a way where you look at reality split up into two different camps. You know, there's the spiritual world and then there's the physical world. And you look at those two areas as mamish opposites. Mamish opposites. The problem with such a perspective, and because of that, when a person has that outlook on life, when a person looks at Yiddishkeit in such a way, the problem is he's never really looking to fill the earth with light. He's never really looking to fill dark places with light. His whole focus in life is just to run away from darkness. That's his whole focus. So somehow to fix his own neshama, as if to say that there's always a problem, and his problem is just to run away, to escape from his own tsaros, from his own darkness. That's called tayu. That's called chaos. That's called chaos, because there's no way to really escape that. If you look at reality in a dark way, in a way that it's full of emptiness and darkness, and there's no way to fix it, all you have to do is to escape it. You can't escape it. There's only one escape: suicide. That's not it. There's only one option. That's called chaos. Before Avram Avinu, again, this is Dvarim Pshutim, but again, these are deep things, going to mamish the mysteries of creation itself. Before Avram Avinu came on the scene, the way the world was created the way the world was run as well is in such a way called tayu. Tayu means, the Arizal said, everything in this world has a body and it has a soul. That's the way Hashem created the world in such a way. Before Avram Avinu came on the scene, the world was set up in such a way where the body, the kalim, the vessels, and the light, and the neshama that's supposed to become one with the vessels were in total contrast from each other. And there was no way for them to become one with each other. There was this contrast. Noach himself was a tzaddik. There's no question he was a tzaddik. But the way he served Hashem was in the way of tayu. He served Hashem in such a way where he was not able to see the union, to see the oneness between the body and the soul. And because of that, the purification that was necessary to bring purity to the world it could only have come in a way of destruction. Because the whole idea of what? Of fixing the problem, of taking that which is ugly and somehow turning it into light, somehow turning it into something that's beautiful, that was outside of their perspective. That was outside their perspective. The only way that they saw a way to serve Hashem was what? Is to escape the ugliness, to somehow disengage from the ugliness. But to go into the ugliness and to somehow bring light into that situation, that was not a part of their perspective. B'chlal not. That wasn't their Yiddishkeit. That wasn't their Yiddishkeit. And therefore, if Hashem needed to purify the earth from Averas, from impurity, the only way possible was to completely destroy all of life. Because life was so empty, it was so dark, it was so disgusting, that in their perspective of reality, it's impossible for it to be fixed. Chazal make a point of saying that when Noach, after the Mabul, already Noach had charata, Noach had regret that he didn't daven for his generation. What changed? What changed? Before the Mabul, he had 120 years building a teva. 120 years, and the idea of davening never came into his head. After the Mabul's over, that's the first thing that pops into his head. I should have davened for him. What changed? What changed?
So the Arizal taught what changed was the mamish, the genetic makeup of reality changed. The Mabul somehow rebooted the system in such a way that from now on, the way to serve Hashem is not by escaping ugliness. Not by escaping ugliness or escaping one's own demons. That's not the way how a person serves Hashem anymore. After post-Mabul means that the way to serve Hashem is by way of bringing light into the world, which means not escaping darkness, but by saturating, by filling darkness with light. That's Avram Avinu. Hashem looks at Adam, he looks at Cain, he looks at Hevel, he looks at Shes, all these generations, he looks at Noach, and he says what? How long could there be darkness already? Because all these tzaddikim, of course they were involved in bringing light, but they weren't trying to bring light into the darkness, they were trying to escape the darkness and create a new place where there's light. But this world is already shone batel, it's too late, it's lost. So Hashem says, how long could it go on like this? This is not the type of world that I wanted. Taveh ha'ayra, let light come. V'yomer l'kim yar, Hashem said, let there be light, za Avram Avinu. That's Avram. What made Avram special is what? Is his desire and his passion to what? To uplift all of life. Not to escape. Not to escape. Not to become, not to look at life with negative eyes and only see the negative and try to escape from that ugliness. But no, to transfer, to uplift and to transform darkness into light. The name Avram, what does the name Avram mean? Chazal say the name Avram is an acronym for Av Hamoin Goyim, the father of a multitude of nations. A multitude of nations. What means a multitude of nations? The main nation that comes out of Avram is the Jewish people. What does it mean? He's a multitude of nations. It means the whole essence of Avram Avinu was what? Was someone who looked at all of reality as his children. Not just I like this one and the other one I don't care about. That's a Noach perspective, where you make a choice between the good and the bad, and you separate between the two. In Avram Avinu's perspective, it's all light. He's the father of a multitude of nations. Chazal say, right, when Avram Avinu was being tested with the Akedah, Chazal say that Hashem had to say to him, Kach lecha as bincha, as yichidcha, as Yitzchak, right? Your son, your only son Yitzchak. So Chazal say that Hashem said to Avram Avinu, your son, and Avram said, I have two sons, and Hashem said, your only son. So he said, they're both my only son. They're both my only son. There's a mice they say that someone once went to the I can't remember the name of it. It's a Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. That there was a rich guy and he wanted to find a guy for his daughter. So he plopped himself in the base medrash for a week, and after a week of scouting out the guys, he goes to Yeshiva and he says, whatever, I'm so and so, and I like to, I was here for a week, and this certain guy that I had my eye on, looks like the best guy to me. I want it for my daughter-in-law. So the Rashi was like, yeah, very nice. Which guy are you talking about? So he said the guy that sits in the back with that, that shtender over there. She was like, that's my ben Yoch, that's my only son. So the guy's like, okay, so I didn't, I don't have the audacity to think that I should marry to Rosh Hashiva's family. Okay, fine. So, but there's a runner-up. Who's your runner-up? The guy that sits over there with that shtender. It's like, that guy is my ben Yoch, my only son. So the guy's like, how does a person have two only sons? So the Rosh was like, I have 300 only sons. All the guys in Yeshiva are my only sons. That's what Avram Avinu said, right? Hashem says, your only son. I have two only sons, Yitzchak and Yishmael. So Hashem says Yitzchak. What does that mean? Because Avram Avinu had such perspective, he had such eyes that he didn't see any ugliness. When he looked at Yishmael, he saw only light, which caused a little problems. That's why Sarimenu had to be the more practical one to tell him, it's very nice that you only see light, but practically speaking, Yishmael is not a good influence. But Avram Avinu only saw light. He mamish only saw light. That's what Hashem wanted. The Jewish people are coming from such a person. Because the tachlis of Yiddishkeit, the tachlis, the geula, what Mashiach means, what everything that we're all waiting for is what? Is not the destruction of life. Not the destruction of evil. That's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is what? Is the absorption of negativity into goodness. That's what we want. So there's two types of ways to purify earth. There's the way of the Mabul, that the way to purify earth is by destroying it. And then there's the way of purifying the earth when Mashiach comes. By what? By Eretz Yisrael absorbing its enemies. And these are two different perspectives, b'chlal. Before the Mabul, the only way of serving Hashem was by escaping evil, and therefore the purification process had to be by destroying evil. But when Mashiach comes, that's not the goal. What Mashiach means, what Klal Yisrael means, what Geula means, what redemption means is what? Is the absorption of evil into good. The absorption of evil into good. It means that not to escape one's demons, not to run away from negativity, but to face it head on and to find goodness in there, to uplift it, to become bigger from it. That's what Klal Yisrael means. That's what Gula means. That's what Mashiach means. That's the meaning of this pasuk in Yechezkel, that somehow by burying our enemies into Eretz Yisrael, by Eretz Yisrael, the land of holiness, absorbing its enemies, that's going to somehow bring a tikkun. That's going to purify the earth. And if you think about it, Chazal say that during the times of the Mabul, there was one place on earth where the Mabul didn't come. Chazal said, where did the Mabul not come? Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael, the place of Eretz Yisrael, the place of the Jewish people, the concept of destroying life does not exist there. This concept of purifying life by destroying life, that does not exist in Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is always post-Mabul. Eretz Yisrael from the beginning was post-Mabul. Eretz Yisrael was always from a Avinu perspective. Eretz Yisrael was always meant changing darkness into light. Like this concept of what? Of purging evil from existence by destroying people, by destroying life, that does not exist in Eretz Yisrael. And it's Rahman. Eretz Yisrael is the one place where there's so much love. There should be so much love. We all know the whole world is fighting. The whole world is mamish crazy over Eretz Yisrael. They kill each other for Eretz Yisrael. It's the opposite of what Eretz Yisrael means. Eretz Yisrael means the opposite of fighting. Eretz Yisrael means love. Eretz Yisrael means all heart. Eretz Yisrael means all light. And until Mashiach comes, it's mamish the opposite of that. So we have to be mechazik ourselves. We have to mamish be mechazik ourselves. Let me end off with a quick story. Rabbi from Parshas was a student, was a talmid of the Chayzer from Lublin, the great seer of Lublin. So it was one Rosh Hashanah, after davening, Rabbunim was hanging out with his colleagues the Chassidim, and he said that if any of you guys want to know, I know exactly what Vart the Rebbe is going to talk about this coming Tish, and I know exactly what he's going to say. Okay, that's pretty good. So they asked him, what is he going to say? So he says he's going to talk about Parashas Noach. The pasuk says in this week's Parasha, after the Mabul was over and Noach was stuck in the boat, the pasuk says, "V'yizkar l'kimis Noach, Hashem remembered Noach v'eskol b'heim asher itam," and all the animals that were with him. So okay, what is he going to say? So Rabbunim said he's going to say the following thing. He says that sometimes there are people that act like animals. There's such a thing. People act like animals. How does Hashem bring a Yeshua? How does Hashem remember such people? So the Rebbe is going to say, "V'yizkar l'kimis Noach," that when Hashem looks at a tzaddik, when Hashem remembers a tzaddik, when a tzaddik remembers him, v'eskol b'heim itam. Hashem is filled with such love by looking at a tzaddik that he's able to remember and give life to even those people that look like behemoths. So a couple hours later, the Rebbe goes to the Tish. The Chayzer is sitting by the Tish, and he opens his mouth. He quotes his pasuk, says the Vart. So afterwards, the Chassidim go to Rabbunim, mamish ruach hakodesh. He says it's not ruach hakodesh. It happens to be that during davening by Rosh Hashanah, I was sitting next to the Rabbi, and he was saying Shemon Esrei very loud. And I knew when he got to that pasuk, which is quoted in Shemon Esrei and Rosh Hashanah Musaf, he said it like 20 times. And I figured, obviously, he had things going on, and I'm sure he's going to talk about that, and I figured this is the part that he's going to say. That's what he said. So what does that mean? What does it mean? That Hashem looks at a tzaddik, Hashem remembers Noach, and all of a sudden, because of him looking at Noach, he remembers all the behemoths too. What does that mean? It means that's what a tzaddik means. A tzaddik has to be someone that and this is what changed in Noach. This is what changed in Noach through the process of the Mabul, by being stuck with behemoths. Because his whole life, 600 years, Noach was able to isolate himself. He isolated himself from people, certainly from animals, from all smallness of this world. But you know what? For those 40 days, for those 180 days, that time period, he was stuck in one room with all the animals of the earth. The lowest of life, with garbage and insects and all sorts of things. And he had to instead of meditating and doing all sorts of things of escaping reality, he had to be involved in feeding insects, in changing, in scooping, stuff from these cages, right? That's what he had to be involved in. So when a tzaddik changes his perspective of instead of looking at life as the source of all negativism, as the source of all evil, as something that he has to escape, and he now looks at life as being something that he has to fill with light. So a tzaddik like that, when Hashem looks at such a tzaddik, he remembers all the behemoths too. So people like us, who I can't say for you, I can say for me, we're like behemoths. So we have to be mechazik ourselves, and somehow we have to be remembered by Hashem. We have to remember by Hashem by what? By remembering this idea that the world is not something to run away from. Parshas is not something to run away from. Life is not something to run away from. Life is something to fill with life, to fill with light. That's what we have to mechazek ourselves. And the taharas arts, the purification of the earth that we're all waiting for, is not by means of destruction. It's by means of absorbing negativity into light. That's the way that we have to go about. That's what Klal Yisrael means. We should be zeicha very, very soon to come to this time period, not to have to go through the wars, but at least to get to the taharas arts, the purification of Eretz Yisrael, by again this idea of changing darkness into light. Amen.
We're going to be having